Hey guys, welcome back. This is Phil from underKG.com. Today we're going to take a look at the BlackBerry KEYone. Before we get to the review, now this has a signal reception issue. I went to the forum and there are some people and some of the reviewers even encountered that problem. So it goes like this. The signal bar is full and at one point it goes from 5 to 1. And at that point you cannot use your data connection. No data out, no data in. And the only way to resolve that is to reboot your phone or to go into the airplane mode and get it back off. And I'm going to assume that this does not happen in all of the units and that this is resolvable. Because this is not, then I don't have to proceed with the rest of this review because you shouldn't buy this phone, period. So hoping that this is a resolvable problem, let's get into the review. Firstly, the build is very solid. Most of them is made out of metal and that grippy material on the back feels really good and it really is grippy. It makes it hard to fall off from your hand even when you're using with only one of your hands. And also the side of the phone, the edges are pretty rounded, so it gives you a better grip when you're holding it. The only part that I didn't like so much was the camera. There's a ring around the camera and they have the pattern on it that is very prone to dirt. It collects them fairly easily. Within a few days, you'll find it within the pattern of the camera ring. And also the buttons do not come in the finest quality. They squeak a little. They're not perfectly fit to the device. The keyboard is not entirely solid either. When you're swiping from some part of the keyboard, it squeaks. One bonus that BlackBerry has given us is the convenience key right here that allows you to launch any app of your own. The 4.5 inches of display is also pretty good. It's got rounded corners, 2.5D glass. Perhaps the only thing that I don't like is that weird color tone. Everything else is fine. It's that cyan that has a bit fluorescent-ish tone to it. And because they know that there are picky people like me, they have given us a screen mode that you can choose from cold, normal, to warm. There is also a hidden sRGB mode in developer options, just like any other Android Nougat device. So you can enable that and it doesn't do anything because it gets turned off back when you get back to the option. And maybe it's just me, but the scrolling is a bit slippery. It's a bit harder than the other phones to stop at the place that I want. It scrolls faster than the other phones. And below that screen are 3 hard-coded capacitive keys, back, home, and multitasking, and it's just that they're too close to both screen and the keyboard. When you're typing, you accidentally happen to touch those keys, and when you're touching those keys, you accidentally happen to touch something on the dock because they're so close and nearby. And also the screen is a bit tall. They did cut out some parts. It has a shorter ratio than most of the standard Android phones, but even with that, it's harder to touch on the upper hand side of the phone. So I can't really pull down the status bar only with one hand. I have to try very hard. And just one final minor complaint, the backlit for the touch keys and the keyboard go off in different timing. I don't know why, but the keyboard gets turned off slightly later than the navigation key. Details, please. What I'm really satisfied with, however, is that fingerprint reader. We're there in spacebar. So you just put your finger on the spacebar and it locks the phone. It's pretty fast and accurate and it's just perfectly ergonomic. The location is just simply perfect. And it also has that glowing light in dark that tells you where exactly it is. It's just simply amazing. Great implementation. Now the biggest thing about this phone is of course the keyboards, and they're pretty good. They're pretty well sized and the key pressure is just about optimal. The key backlighting is beautiful. It's got shortcuts like Control-C, Control-V. It's got touch sensors built into it so you can just swipe to scroll your screen. And while you're typing, instead of doing this on the screen, you can just double tap on the keyboard to use that as a virtual cursor scroll. And a lot more cool features. It's just that keyboard scrolling is sometimes a bit slippery as it is with the scrolling on the screen, as I told you beforehand. And I think that partly is because that keyboard is glossy. I would have preferred a matte finish on the keyboard. But always keep in mind that you can use your spacebar as you would do it in PC to scroll a page on browsers, and you can assign shortcuts to each and one of those keys, although they only work in the default launcher. By the way, if you have to use more than one language that cannot be combined together, then you would have to press Alt-Enter to switch the language, and that comes in problematic on Chrome address bar. It doesn't know that you're trying to switch a language, and it just presses Enter for you. While the hardware specs are not that impressive with Snapdragon 625 and only 3 GB of RAM, the performance is actually pretty solid. Anything that you launches pretty fast. It launches pretty fast, and just things like BlackBerry Help, and we can move into Calendar. Everything doesn't take that long to launch, and the the animation, the smoothness, everything was pretty satisfactory. With the resolution being slightly less than Full HD, it didn't have any problem with any of the jobs that I threw at it, except for 3D gaming. That's not intended for the Snapdragon 625. The software is also pretty interesting. Both BlackBerry and TCL are known for their stockish Android, and it follows the same trail. It's mostly stock Android 7.1.1 Nougat. They have added a few features and they're mostly unintrusive. There is a privacy shade, the DTAG app to find out how secure your phone is, and the power center that allows you to choose your own resolution and frame rate for your games and apps. The traditional BlackBerry Hub Plus that takes all the social media and messengers in one place is there, along with the BBM of course, but I've really never been a fan of those. Another thing is the productivity tab that also combines your calendar, BlackBerry Hub, and tasks, and it gives you a glimpse of what you have to do on today. There's also a neat battery bar on your corner. However, one interesting part is that you cannot get rid of the battery percentage on the status bar unless you go to a hidden system UI tuner. It also has the ambient display, but unlike the Nexus, it only works when notifications come in. And it has some weird choices like having a gesture menu that only has jump to camera option right there, while the gesture sounds like it should have flip to mute option in there, but it does not, but whatnot. It really doesn't matter, it's just minor things. Talking about camera gestures, there are two ways to launch the camera. You can swipe, or you can press the power key twice to fire the camera. There is the auto mode and manual mode, which allows you to choose your own focus, shutter speed, ISO, white balance, yada yada yada. And there is an exposure control that works in both manual and auto that you can use your keyboard touch sensor to control. And to take the photo, you can use that button there or the spacebar. Since it has a moderately good sensor, the photos are pretty good in daylight and low lighting condition, but it doesn't have the OIS built in, so you have to be very sure to be not shaky. And if you're a selfie person, you might be moderately okay with that. It takes okay photos, not impressive, not terrible, it's just selfie camera, it works. But something that most of the people will not be satisfied with is the mono speaker there. I'm not expecting like a stereo speaker because this is not like a multimedia super package. Don't expect like the bass boosting speaker that you know from BlackBerry. But since it's a BlackBerry, call quality is pretty good, and you know what else is good? The battery is exceptional. It's got 3505 milliamps of battery built in, and thanks to the low power processor and smaller screen size than the usual, it's going to give you 7 hours to 7.5 hours of screen on time. If you're lucky, you should be getting like 8 hours of screen on time. And that is, of course, with full LTE network and me web surfing all the time. So if you're more like a Wi-Fi person than just simple Messenger on Instagram, then you should be getting like 10 hours of that screen on time without any problem. And when you're even done with that much battery, you can top that up with the USB Type-C port there, reversible, and Quick Charge 3.0 supported. Unfortunately, it takes a bit of time. It takes about 2 hours. And to make that a bit faster, it's got a thing called the boost mode. It's going to kill some processes. It's going to clock down the processor. It's going to kill some animations. In my experiences, though, it didn't really have too much impact. For half an hour of charging without the boost mode, I got 32%. With the boost mode, 33, 34, so I don't know. I really didn't see anything happening. Now, that I told you this much about this phone, I have to give you the verdict, the bottom line. I would say that the BlackBerry KEYone is a mixed bag. Firstly, it's a fairly impressive phone, but in the same time, it's very, very expensive, especially as a Snapdragon 625 device. In the US, which is, I think, one of the cheapest countries to buy this in, it costs $549, and in other countries, it only gets more and more expensive. And for Snapdragon 625 and 3 GB of RAM, that sounds ridiculous, even with the keyboard. When the phone is around $550, you have certain expectations, but KEYone does not meet some of them in a few areas, like the finishes there, or the lack of OIS or speaker quality. But of course, if there's a reason that you even consider the KEYone is the keyboard. And the keyboard did a great job. It's a nicely built keyboard. And the overall build quality was okay. But I wouldn't personally pay $550 for this phone at this quality. Probably at half the price. And, you know, half the price still is double the price of similar spec phones just because it's got a keyboard. It's not anywhere near perfect, but it's not as terrible that I want to stop you from buying without any reason. Because this is one sleek phone, and I also do like the design and that amazing keyboard below that screen. And after all, as Charlie Chaplin has said it, the life is not about a meaning, it's about desire. So if you want to follow your desires, if you want to fulfill your desires, please go on. But if you ask me, again, I don't want to pay $550 for this phone. So that was a quick look at the BlackBerry KEYone. We hope it helped. If you have any question about this little phone with the fingerprint reader on that space bar, please leave down a comment. Thank you all for watching. You can always meet us on Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, and Google+, and we surely will see you guys later. Ciao.